The bitter winter wind howled across the barren fields outside Thornwood village, but Meredith Rowe barely noticed the cold that seeped through her threadbare dress. At 23, her once vibrant face had grown gaunt with grief, though her striking beauty remained undimmed. Her long golden hair, tied back with a frayed ribbon, cascaded down her back as she trudged through the snow, holding tight to the small, mittened hand of her 6-year-old son, Thomas. "Not much further, Thomas," she promised, forcing a smile. The worn fabric of her dress pulled across her slender figure as she leaned down to adjust his woolen cap. The neckline of her dress, once modest but now stretched and torn from years of wear, dipped low enough to expose the delicate skin of her collarbone. She tugged it up self-consciously, though there was no one to see them on this desolate road. 2 months earlier, the plague had claimed her husband. 2 years before that, the same pestilence had taken her parents and younger sister. Now, with winter settling in and their rent overdue, she and Thomas had been evicted from the tiny room they called home. Their sole remaining hope lay in a letter that had arrived the previous week. "Your great-uncle Edwin has passed," the village priest had read to her, as she could not decipher the written word herself. "Having no closer kin, his property at the edge of Thornwood Forest passes to you. An inheritance." The very word had kindled a spark of hope in her chest. But that hope had dimmed when the priest continued, explaining that Edwin had been considered half-mad by the villagers, a recluse living in a dilapidated cottage on a worthless patch of soggy land. Now, as Meredith and Thomas rounded the final bend in the road, she caught her first glimpse of their inheritance. Her heart sank. The cottage was even worse than described, its thatched roof partially collapsed, its stone walls crumbling. A small, murky pond lay to one side, surrounded by tangled undergrowth. Behind the cottage stretched a small field, too waterlogged for proper farming. "Is this our new home, Mother?" Thomas asked, his blue eyes wide with childhood's invincible optimism. "Yes, my love," she answered, squeezing his hand. "It needs some work, but it is ours." As they approached, a scrawny brown dog emerged from behind the cottage, barking frantically before cowering when Meredith reached toward it. "Look, Mother, we have a dog," Thomas exclaimed with delight. The dog, though wary, allowed Thomas to approach after a few moments. Its ribs showed through its dull coat, but its brown eyes held intelligence. "He is so hungry," Thomas said, stroking the dog's head. "What shall we call him?" "Perhaps Guardian," Meredith suggested, "for he has been guarding our new home." Guardian followed them as they cautiously entered the cottage. Inside, it was a jumble of oddities. Shelves lined with dusty jars of dried herbs and roots, strange implements hanging from hooks, and piles of scrolls and papers covered every surface. A rickety table stood in the center, surrounded by 3 mismatched chairs. A narrow staircase led to what she presumed was a small sleeping loft. "Uncle Edwin was a peculiar man," Meredith murmured, taking in their surroundings. That first night, they huddled together in the cleanest corner, wrapped in their meager blankets. The wind whistled through gaps in the walls, and Meredith lay awake wondering if they would survive until spring. Morning brought weak sunlight and renewed determination. Meredith set Thomas to collecting fallen branches for firewood while she assessed their situation. The cottage, despite its dilapidation, had sound bones. The roof could be patched, the walls mended. In the light of day, she discovered a small garden plot, overgrown but still containing hardy winter vegetables, turnips, carrots, and kale struggling beneath the weeds. As she dug in the frozen earth to harvest what vegetables remained, Guardian began barking excitedly at the edge of the murky pond. "What is it, boy?" she called, but the dog continued his frantic barking. Thomas ran over to investigate. "Mother!" Guardian found something. Wiping her hands on her skirt, Meredith joined them. The dog was pawing at something half buried in the muddy bank, a small wooden box. With trembling fingers, she pried open the lid. Inside lay a tarnished silver pendant on a broken chain. The pendant featured a strange symbol, a tree with roots extending as deep as its branches reached high. "Pretty," Thomas said, reaching for it. Not yet, love. Let me clean it first. She tucked the pendant into her bodice for safekeeping and returned to her work. That evening, after a simple meal of root vegetable stew, Meredith explored more of the cottage. In a dusty corner, she found a leather-bound journal. Opening it cautiously, she discovered pages filled with sketches of plants alongside writing she could not read. She set it aside, wishing she had the gift of letters. The next morning brought their first visitor, a portly man astride a fine horse. I am Bartholomew Winters, steward to Lord Fairfax, he announced importantly. I have come to discuss the purchase of this property. It is not for sale, Meredith replied, standing tall despite her frayed clothes. It is our home now. The steward's eyes lingered inappropriately on the curve of her neck where the pendant now hung, cleaned of mud but still mysterious. Lord Fairfax is prepared to be generous. This land is of little value, waterlogged and poor for crops. He offers 10 silver coins. It was more money than Meredith had ever possessed, enough to rent a room in the village for several months. Yet something held her back. I thank you for the offer, but we will stay. The steward's pleasant expression hardened. You would be wise to reconsider. A woman alone cannot manage such a property. Lord Fairfax will not make this offer again. After he departed, Meredith sat on a fallen log, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. But Thomas called her attention back to Guardian, who was now digging frantically at the earthen floor inside the cottage. Stop that, Guardian, she scolded, pulling the dog away. But when she went to fill the hole, something caught her eye, a glint of metal beneath the dirt. Kneeling, she scraped away more earth until she uncovered an iron ring. With Thomas helping, she pulled, revealing a small trapdoor. What is under there? Thomas asked, peering into the darkness. I do not know, Meredith admitted. Let me fetch the candle. By candlelight, they discovered a small cellar. Crude shelves lined the walls, holding dozens of glass jars filled with dried plants, powders, and liquids. In the center stood a work table scattered with strange implements, mortars and pestles, small knives, and copper pots. What is all this? Thomas wondered. I believe your great-uncle was an herbalist, Meredith said, examining the contents of the jars. Some she recognized, lavender, rosemary, mint, but others were foreign to her. That night, after Thomas slept, Meredith examined the journal again. Though she could not read the words, the detailed drawings of plants alongside symbols, suggesting their uses, began to make sense. One page showed the same pendant she now wore around her neck. A knock at the door startled her. Opening it cautiously, she found an elderly woman leaning on a gnarled walking stick. So Edwin's niece has come at last, the old woman said, peering at Meredith with bright, intelligent eyes. I am Agnes from the village. I was a friend to your uncle. Meredith invited her in, grateful for the company. Agnes's gaze landed on the pendant. I see you found it. Good. Edwin would want you to have it. What does it mean? Meredith asked. It is the symbol of the healers, those who understand the secrets of plants and their powers. Edwin was such a one, as was his father before him, and his grandmother before that. Agnes's eyes drifted to the open trapdoor. You have found his workshop as well. Tell me, child, do you know anything of herbs and their healing properties? Only what my mother taught me, simple remedies for fevers and digestive complaints. Agnes nodded. It is a beginning. Edwin kept detailed records of his knowledge. If you wish, I can teach you to read them. Hope sparked in Meredith's heart. You would do that? Edwin helped many in our village when physicians were too costly or too far away. Since his passing, there has been no one. The knowledge should not die with him. In the days that followed, Agnes became a frequent visitor, teaching Meredith the basics of reading and explaining the properties of the herbs in Edwin's cellar. Meredith learned that her great-uncle had been respected for his healing abilities, even as people whispered about his eccentricities. Why did Lord Fairfax's steward offer to buy this land? Meredith asked one afternoon. He said it was worthless. Agnes's eyes narrowed. Did he now? That is curious indeed. The Fairfax family has coveted this property for generations, though none know why. Your uncle refused all their offers, no matter how generous. This revelation troubled Meredith, but she had little time to dwell on it. Winter was harsh and survival took precedence. She and Thomas worked daily to improve their home, patching the roof, sealing gaps in the walls, clearing the overgrown garden in preparation for spring planting. Guardian proved his worth by catching rabbits to supplement their meager meals. The dog also continued his strange behavior, repeatedly digging at specific spots around the property or diving into the frigid pond, emerging with mud and sticks. One crisp morning, while Thomas and Guardian played by the pond's edge, the boy came running to her, clutching something in his small hand. "Look what Guardian found, Mother," he exclaimed, holding out a smooth, dark green stone. Meredith took it, turning it over in her palm. It was unlike any stone she had seen before, almost translucent when held to the light. "Where did he find this?" "In the pond. He keeps diving in the same spot." Curious, Meredith wrapped herself in her shawl and followed Thomas to the pond. Guardian was swimming in circles, occasionally diving beneath the murky surface. "There must be something down there," she mused. That evening, she showed the stone to Agnes. The old woman's hands trembled as she examined it. "This is jade, a stone from distant lands, very valuable. There are more in the pond. Guardian keeps finding them." Agnes frowned. "That is most curious. Edwin never mentions such treasures." The next day, Meredith waded into the shallow edges of the pond, feeling with her feet for anything unusual. Near where Guardian kept diving, her toe struck something hard and flat. Gathering her courage, she lifted her skirts and reached down, her fingers closing around a smooth edge. Pulling, she dislodged what appeared to be a large flat stone. But it was too regular, too precisely cut to be natural. Further investigation revealed it to be part of a submerged structure. With Thomas's help, she cleared away more mud and vegetation, exposing what appeared to be a stone channel running from the pond toward the field beyond. "What is it, Mother?" Thomas asked. "I believe it is a sluice, a channel to control water flow," she replied, recalling seeing similar structures at the mill in the village. "But why would it be here?" Over the next days, Meredith and Thomas followed the channel, clearing debris as they went. It led to the field behind the cottage, where it branched into several smaller channels. Guardian helped in his way, digging excitedly along the path. One afternoon, as Meredith cleared a section of the main channel, her tool struck something metallic. Digging carefully, she unearthed a small metal gate, rusted but still functional. When she managed to raise it, water from the pond began flowing more freely through the channel. "Thomas, look. The water is draining from the field," she called excitedly. Indeed, the perpetually soggy field was beginning to dry as the water found its proper course through the channels. As the water receded, Guardian began digging frantically in the newly exposed mud. Following him, Meredith discovered rows of strange plants emerging from the soil, roots with twisted shapes unlike any she had seen in her uncle's garden. That evening, she showed one of the roots to Agnes. The old woman gasped. "Ginseng, and of remarkable size." She turned the root in her gnarled hands. "This is extraordinarily valuable. Physicians in the cities pay handsomely for such specimens. It is said to restore vitality and cure many ailments." "There are dozens more emerging as the field drains," Meredith said. Agnes's eyes widened. "Child, do you understand what this means? Your uncle was cultivating ginseng in secret, a crop more valuable than gold. But it requires specific conditions to grow: damp but not flooded soil, partial shade. He must have engineered the pond and channels to maintain perfect conditions. But why let the system fall into disrepair? Why let the field flood?" Agnes frowned. Perhaps he feared discovery. Lord Fairfax would certainly have seized such valuable land had he known its true purpose. The mystery deepened when, a week later, Thomas discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards in the sleeping loft. Inside lay a metal box containing papers bearing official seals. Agnes, now teaching Meredith to read, helped decipher them. "These are deeds," she explained, "and letters of agreement. According to these, your uncle was supplying ginseng to physicians and apothecaries in London for many years." "The jade stones?" Meredith questioned. "Payment, perhaps, from merchants trading with the East. Jade is highly prized there, but rare in England." With each discovery, the true value of her inheritance became clearer. The worthless land contained a carefully engineered system for growing one of the most valuable medicinal plants in existence. The murky pond had concealed both the water management system and, apparently, her uncle's hidden payment cache. As spring arrived, Meredith worked tirelessly to restore the water channels and care for the emerging ginseng plants. Agnes taught her how to read her uncle's journals, which contained detailed instructions for cultivation, harvest, and preparation. But her activities did not go unnoticed. Lord Fairfax's steward returned, this time with 2 burly men. "I see you have been making improvements," Bartholomew observed coldly. "Lord Fairfax has reconsidered his offer. 20 silver coins now." "The property is still not for sale," Meredith replied firmly. The steward's face darkened. "You misunderstand. This is not a request. Lord Fairfax has discovered documentation suggesting this land rightfully belongs to his family. You would be wise to accept his generosity rather than face eviction with nothing." Fear gripped Meredith's heart, but she maintained her composure. "I have documentation proving this land belonged to my uncle, and now to me. Your lord has no claim here." After they departed, Agnes suggested Meredith seek help from the magistrate in the next town. "Take the deeds and your uncle's journals. The law will protect your rights." But before she could leave, Meredith received another visitor, an elegantly dressed man who introduced himself as Carl Ingram, a physician from London. "I had an arrangement with Edwin Rowe to purchase his ginseng crop annually," he explained. "When my letters went unanswered, I decided to investigate personally." Meredith showed him the flourishing ginseng field. "My uncle passed away this winter. I am his heir, but I am still learning his methods." Dr. Ingram examined the plants with professional interest. "These are exceptional specimens, far superior to those imported from the East. Your uncle's cultivation methods were revolutionary." He turned to her. "I would like to continue our arrangement, madam. The price I paid your uncle was 50 gold coins per harvest." The sum was staggering, more money than most peasants would see in a lifetime. "I accept," Meredith said, "but I require an advance to secure my claim to this land. Lord Fairfax is attempting to seize it." Dr. Ingram frowned. "That would be most unfortunate. The unique conditions here cannot be easily replicated elsewhere." He reached into his coat. "I can advance you 20 gold coins immediately." "Will that suffice?" Armed with the gold and her uncle's documents, Meredith traveled to see the magistrate. The case was quickly resolved in her favor, Lord Fairfax's fraudulent claim dismissed when faced with the official deeds and record of ownership dating back 3 generations. Upon her return, Meredith found Bartholomew Winters and his men attempting to divert the pond's water away from her property. With the magistrate's ruling in hand and several village men Agnes had summoned as witnesses, she confronted them. "This land is mine by law," she declared. "Any further interference will be reported to the king's justice." The steward and his men withdrew, though his venomous glare promised this would not be the end of the matter. In the weeks that followed, Meredith threw herself into learning everything she could from her uncle's journals. Agnes taught her to read more fluently, and together they explored the full extent of Edwin's knowledge. She learned that the pendant she wore was indeed the symbol of a secret society of healers, men and women who preserved ancient knowledge of medicinal plants. Her uncle had been a respected member, his cultivation of ginseng only part of his work. The jars in his cellar contained remedies for dozens of common and rare ailments. With Agnes's guidance, Meredith began preparing these remedies herself. Word spread through the village of the healer's niece who had taken up his work. People came seeking help for their ailments, offering payment in goods or services when they could. By summer's end, the cottage had been fully repaired. The once murky pond now sparkled in the sunlight, its engineered channels functioning perfectly to irrigate the expanded ginseng fields. Meredith had planted a proper vegetable garden and even kept a few chickens and a goat. Guardian, no longer scrawny, patrolled the property proudly. Thomas, thriving in their new life, helped with the simpler tasks and played happily in the surroundings that had once seemed so forbidding. Dr. Ingram returned for the autumn harvest, bringing not only the remainder of his payment, but also orders from other physicians and apothecaries in London. The jadestones Guardian had discovered in the pond proved valuable enough to purchase adjoining land when it became available, allowing Meredith to expand her cultivation. As her business grew, Meredith hired several villagers to help with the labor. She established a small workshop where she prepared not only ginseng but also other medicinal herbs grown on her land. Her remedies gained reputation beyond the local area, and merchants began to seek her out. Lord Fairfax made no further attempts to claim her property, though Meredith later learned that his family's interest stemmed from an old legend that treasures were buried on the land, a distorted version of the truth about the valuable ginseng growing there. By the following spring, Meredith had established herself as both a successful cultivator of medicinal herbs and a healer in her own right. The simple change she had made, restoring her uncle's ingenious water management system, had revealed the true value of her inheritance and created a thriving business. Agnes, seeing her protégé flourish, finally shared the full truth. Your uncle knew his time was short. He deliberately let the land appear worthless to protect it from Lord Fairfax until you arrived. But how did he know I would come? That I would discover the secrets? Agnes smiled. He did not know for certain, but he believed in the strength of his bloodline. The pendant guided Guardian to you, and the dog guided you to the knowledge you needed. She patted Meredith's hand. Edwin would be proud of what you have accomplished. 5 years later, Meredith stood at the edge of her property, now expanded to include 3 fields of ginseng and other medicinal plants, 2 ponds with their intricate channel systems, and a substantial stone house that had replaced the dilapidated cottage. Thomas, now 11, worked alongside the field hands, learning the business that would one day be his inheritance. Where once a desperate widow had seen only a worthless, waterlogged plot of land, now stood a prosperous enterprise known throughout the region. Physicians from as far away as France sought her products. The simple peasant woman who had arrived with nothing but a child and hope had become a respected businesswoman and healer. Guardian, gray-muzzled now but still vigilant, sat at her feet as Meredith fingered the pendant she always wore. The simple change she had made, recognizing the purpose of her uncle's seemingly useless pond and restoring its function, had uncovered not just material wealth, but a legacy of knowledge and purpose. As the sun set over her flourishing land, Meredith reflected on how her greatest inheritance had not been the property itself, but the wisdom to see value where others saw only worthlessness. In reclaiming her uncle's vision, she had created her own undeniable success story, one that would sustain her family for generations to come.